Well, good morning, and good morning to those on Zoom and other such high-flown technical things, but it's good to see you. As Amy mentioned earlier, we're going to start today a mini-series, only 3, of looking at this one well-known verse. Unfortunately for me, this verse really conjures up one thing, and I think the only time I've ever used it, I've never preached on it as such, but the only time I use it tends to be in funeral services. But having said that, it is a tremendous verse to use because it has all the strength, encouragement, all that really Amy was reminding us of there. But I want to start with a question. This is a time when some of you can gloat. You can gloat unlimited today. Fathers, mothers, uncles, aunts, whatever you are, gloat. Feel free. Who amongst us here today, and even those on Zoom at home, who has taken their driving test and passed on the first go? Oh dear, thank you, I think. Who had to take it a second or more time? Yes. Well, I have good reason, I think, and I think it was unfair. He said I was rash. Rash was the word he used at the junction. If he's seen me since then, he'd definitely think I was rash. I have a friend. I think he was a friend, alas, not with us now, but we had a testing moment, shall we say. Because this friend of mine said to me, having heard I hadn't got through my first test, I'll take you out, I'll give you some practice. So off we merrily went. Now, I should say at this time, we were living in Wiltshire, and many of the roads around there were quite easy to drive, to be honest, except when you got near Swindon. And near Swindon, if ever you've been to Swindon, I see some nods, there is what we called in Wiltshire the magic roundabout. Now, I'm sure David could go around there in it with his eyes shut. But it's a strange sort of roundabout, because this roundabout, in fact, it's, in a sense, it's not a roundabout. And it's nothing like the magic roundabout we saw as children on television, I can assure you. Because this roundabout you go to, you don't go round it as such. You go into it. And as you go into it, you're faced with almost like cogs in a sort of an old-fashioned clock. Mini roundabouts by the score, as it were, that as you go in, you have to go round this one and then that one, and if you miss one, you've got to go all round all these ones again. Well, this friend of mine said to me, where do you want to go? I said, I don't mind where we go, but the one place I do not want to go is anywhere near Swindon, and certainly not to the magic roundabout. You can keep that. He said, no, would I do that to you? Well, he was the minister at the next church along the road, so I thought, I can trust this man. And he was a good fellow. He was Welsh, Steve, but never mind. But we got on very well, usually. But as we went along, I thought, I don't know, this has a feeling of me of nearing Swindon. And sure enough, as we came along to the next junction, there it was, there in front of me. It was the magic roundabout. And I felt a bit, as I went in, a bit like this man looking at the signposts. All these multitude of places. I should explain to the younger people that the thing on the left-hand side is called an atlas. It's called a map. You wouldn't know of it, but ask your grandparents. They'll tell you all about it. So it is that sometimes life can be a bit like that, looking at that signpost, that life is pointing so many directions, so many ways. And indeed, there are the times it takes us down roads that we wonder, is this really the right road? But there's, if you like, a confusion of ways. This confusion of ways is this poor man standing here not knowing which way to go. No one particular way looks better than another. Did this not many weeks ago, just a few months ago, we went down to Cornwall. And I thought, well, I know my way around. And we were somewhere near Camborne, going towards Helston, and I've been using sat-nav. Come the end, I could have thrown sat-nav out the window. You're telling me rubbish. You're telling me go down here, and there's nothing there. It's not that way. I know, and I'm not sat-nav. And so it is that sometimes you are inclined to throw the thing out the window and be done with it. There is sometimes this confusion of ways. Sometimes, of course, as you merrily walk along or drive along, sometimes it's obvious which way to go. The sign says, go that way, and it's easy. There's no sort of competing ways to go. It's easy to go, and you just keep going. But sometimes it's not always so clear. And sometimes, of course, the way we go in life is not so clear. We start off well, and then complications come. Pain comes. Distress comes. Sometimes the unexpected diversion comes. We're merrily going along, and there are those in this congregation this morning who know this only too well. You have your sort of time and week or days mapped out, and suddenly something happens, and the whole day, and even more sometimes, is totally broken and shattered. You know, that phone call first thing in the morning. You had plans for today. You knew what you were going to do. You'd made promises to other people. You'd do this, you'd go there, you'd see them. You made promises to yourself that you'd go out, perhaps have a day free of all the sort of all the things that demand your time normally. And then the phone call, the email, the knock on the door, and suddenly the whole lot's changed. So life can be like this poor man, bewildered by the many directions. There's a story, and you may wonder why when we're looking at this verse. This is similar to what Richard did last week. I had to listen on Zoom or on YouTube because I wasn't here last Sunday. And I remember looking at the cheeky look in the eye as he said, and today we're finishing on Elijah and Elisha, the readings from Jeremiah. And I thought that's just the comment that I'd like to make. And in a sense, we did it really, or at least Carol did it for me. We're looking at this verse in John. What do? We look, we turn and look at Job. Why do we look at Job? Because Job was a man just like that. He was a wealthy man, happily married man with family. He had land, he had money, he had prestige, he had fame, he had everything you possibly could have wanted, and all was going well. And without going into all the details, suddenly it all changed. And he lost his family, he lost his sons, he lost his home, he lost his land, he lost his stock, he lost his place in society, and even he lost the loyalty of his wife, who said, Job, I'm fed up with this. Just curse God and die. Let's be done with it, done with the whole thing. So he was feeling pretty wretched. And Job, you may remember, if you know the story, had these friends, a bit like my Welsh friend. They had these friends who come to sort of comfort and console and encourage. And they did quite the reverse. And again, each one, the book is 42 or so chapters long, but just a sort of a synopsis is that each friend came along and gave their thoughts and their wisdom. And one who came along in particular came and said, Job, you shouldn't be surprised. In fact, you should be surprised that you haven't suffered more. You must have done something very wicked. Come on, just be honest with yourself and admit it, and all your troubles will be over. He said, no, that isn't it. I've not been perfect, but this has all happened out of my control. And so the friend says to him, look, when you do wrong, you will suffer. But God will not let the wicked person get away with it. They'll get their just deserts one day. Pick up the story again in a moment of Job. Now back to the disciples there. Hearing Jesus' words, I am the way, the truth, and the life. This comes in this sort of passage in John that commences the last part of John's gospel, that really is leading their thinking and their sort of activity as we go towards the cross. And so it is the final part of his earthly ministry. And Jesus comes and talks to them, giving them encouragement, giving them consolation, telling them and reassuring them that he is not going to leave them. And they hear this devastating news when, up until now, things have gone relatively well. There was opposition, but he'd been performing miracles that people came in their droves to see. His teaching brought in hundreds and hundreds of people at each time. He was doing such great things. And suddenly he announces, I'm going to leave you. Leave? You know how it is if you work with someone, or perhaps even someone in your family, who you tend to feel is the glue of the place. They say, well, we're moving, we're going. Something else has come up in life. I'm moving on. And you think almost, how can life go on? How can this office or this factory or this home or whatever, how can we cope without you? You're the one who's the glue to the place. And so it is, he says to them, you know where I'm going. I'm going back to the Father. And I'm going back to prepare a home for you. An eternal home. But one day you will come and you will come and dwell with me. Because I will come and bring you. I will come and bring you along and take you to your heavenly home. Well, Thomas is very honest as Thomas. Thomas probably said what I would have said, and most of us might have said, Lord, we don't really get it. We don't actually know the way. We don't know where you're going, and we don't know the way. How can we know the way? And Philip likewise has questions. What's this all about? What is going to happen? We don't understand what is happening here. And so it is that Jesus has to explain to them. When Philip says, we want one thing, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. That's all we want. You can go then. That's all we want. We want to see the Father. And Jesus says, how long have I been with you, Philip? How long have I been with you, disciples? And you have not understood who I am. You've seen my miracles. You've heard my storytelling of parables. You've heard my teaching that I've given to you as a group of disciples specifically. And still you do not know who I am. The Father and I are one. Very hard to understand. It gets harder the more you try to explain that and explain the Trinity. In fact, probably the harder it gets. But we know the reality is that Jesus is this one who is fully man, fully God. Paul brings this out in a lot of his writings. When he says, and indeed we'll see it in Job's account as well in a moment, Paul says, look, do you not realize that Jesus is the one through whom everything has come? There is nothing above or below in the sea or in the land. There's nothing anywhere that he has not made and has been made through him. He is sovereign. He is supreme. He is God. He's the Son, God the Father, and there's obviously the Holy Spirit. Not in competition with one another, not in some hierarchical order. They are divine. They are God. So when Jesus says he goes to prepare a place, he has the right to be able to enter heaven because that's where he's come from. And that's where he will return. There was a man once, again, you're all far too young to remember it, but there was a book in the 1960s, I think it was. You might have been at primary school, but it's only just. And this man was a bishop, the Bishop of Woolwich. And you'll know exactly the book if you know anything about it. The honest-to-God debate that went on for about the next 10 years. Now, the Bishop of Woolwich had a very good and sort of healthy ambition to make men and women, ordinary men and women, aware that there was a God and who he was, and that they could know him and that he could know them. Very laudable. But he tried to explain things and make things sort of easier, as it were, for the church and for men and women to understand who this God is. He said, no, God isn't up there transcendent and all very spiritual. He's here. He's with us. Because the problem was, what do you do with Jesus? If God ceases to be divine, if God ceases to be truly God, is Jesus just another prophet, another teacher? And he explained Jesus as just a window onto the God life. How wrong, how sad. Because Jesus shows us that he, as he comes to this earth, came to this earth for a reason. The one through whom everything had been made and created. The one through whom nothing exists that doesn't exist. He is the one who restores and keeps this world. He's the one who also comes to take away the biggest problem that man has. Because the problem that he has, and is now confused by all these ways, is that man is a sinner and he needs to be rescued. And so we need to be rescued. And he is the way. But there are challenges to the way. There are those things that come along that will challenge us. And there should be another slide. No, it will come. There we are. The poor little man at the front being chased by all the challenges behind him. And this is what sometimes life can be like. And this is what can be being a Christian can be like. That we hear the demands and the promises that the world makes. And the world does not like, as Amy hinted at, the world doesn't like the Christian way. Because the Christian way seems to sort of say there is one way. The Christian life seems to suggest that no other way is valid or will go anywhere. And this picture reminds us there are challenges. The world says, well, perhaps we don't want a way. We don't want a direction, and we certainly don't want to be told where to go and which direction to go. Philosophy, nothing wrong with philosophy, but philosophy would tell us that if we sort of understood wisdom and became wise enough, we could solve all this world's problems. We could solve the problems of humans living one with another. We wouldn't have wars and threats of wars. We wouldn't have starvation because one nation is greedy and another isn't. We just need to understand where we're at. And you can go back even time before Christ's ministry on earth and find that men and women have been writing philosophy right down to this very present day. From people like Aristotle right round down to our own time. Those who try and work out what life is about. Others say, no, that's not going to work. Become religious. I was listening this morning on radio to a druid because the next weekend is midsummer and the solstice and all the things that go on like at Stonehenge. Wiltshire's a funny county to live in, but there you are. But the druids, they meet. And I used to work with a couple of pagans. Now you think paganism went out donkeys years ago, centuries ago, but no, it is growing strong. And you hear and see umpteen other religions and faiths growing. Because they want a religion and they want a faith, and they want a God who is really like them. In fact, they want to be the God. They want to be the centre of worship. When Paul went to Athens, he commented that the city was like going into a forest of gods, it says in one of the translations. A forest of gods. So many gods. It was easier to find a god than a man in the city of Athens. And so it is that religion would seek to say, come this way. But we say, isn't Christianity a religion? The religion is what we make of something. Jesus is the one who wants to make us. Jesus says he is the way. And then there is secularism, humanism by another name, really, that has existed donkey's year, but the last 600 years, really, you can see how humanism and secularism has grown. People have put their trust in this world, in things, in themselves, because they believe that they have the answer to all the needs. Have they? This election time perhaps airs it more than usual, but there are heated discussions, and Richard's touched on these many a time, that we can't even have a world that is happy to understand gender, race, age, the environment, wealth. And there's that sense, growing sense of pointlessness with so many. And so tragic to see in young people who have really no hope for the future. They don't see any purpose for the future. And there are those who turn to all sorts of antisocial behaviour, because really, what's the point in sort of doing what you're told? And behaving and helping. There's no point. And we have a world that feels it is pointless. And indeed, one only has to look at the advertisements and the conversations about what is nowadays called mindfulness. People know they ain't working. People know that they have thrown out God. They've walked away from that path that he wanted them to go on. And now they are chased, like a bad nightmare, isn't it, this? Being chased by all these monsters. The monsters of come this way, come that way. A man called Harry Van Bell wrote a book a year or two ago, which is called, I think it's called Coram Deo, which is living in God's presence every day. He said something was lost when we collectively decided to live life without God. Secularism represents a loss of religious support and direction for human life. Without God, human life becomes a perpetual search to serve and worship something or someone, indeed anything other than God, without the chance of ever coming to rest anywhere. In this secular age, we have lost that sense of support, and we feel supremely vulnerable in an uncaring universe. Perhaps the time has come to acknowledge that without God, we are not masters of our own fate, that in living our lives we are addressed by someone greater than ourselves, a God who challenges us to live in his way. We think as humans, if we throw out God, if we throw out belief, if we throw out that structure, we will be free. And we discover the reverse happens. We become prisoners. We've become sort of prisoners to all the sorts of demands and temptations that would come against us. But Jesus comes and says, I am the way. Our last slide. Now, in a sense, this is the wrong picture. No, you put the right picture up. In a sense, I chose the wrong picture almost deliberately. Because this shows this road going through pastoral, sweet and pleasant countryside that you'd like to, I wouldn't like to walk on the road too much, but I'd like to walk in the countryside on a beautiful day. You remember sunshine, that yellow thing in the sky, and in summertime, to walk along the road. I know it's an American one because you can tell by the yellow line, but be that as it may, I'd like to walk along it. Sometimes the road that Jesus takes on, indeed most of the time, and most of the road that Jesus takes us upon, doesn't look like that at all. It would look more apt to have a picture of Gaza at the moment, bombed and ruined, desolate and hopeless. Go back to Job for a minute. Job, who has complained that it isn't fair. I try to live my life, a godly life, a good life, a just life, a fair life. And all that seems to happen is I look around and the unjust, the ungodly, the unloving, the uncaring, they seem to thrive. And I struggle. Is that not said today? Perhaps even by some here today. I've tried living a life with Jesus. I tried living a Christian life. But look where it gets me. Look at my neighbours. Look at my friends. Look at where I work or whatever. There, people have no thought and no time for God. They don't want God in their lives. They've rejected him. And yet, do they suffer? Do they get punished? Do they have a hard time? No, they do not. They enjoy life. They come and they seem to be rewarded for their wickedness. Job was not a happy bunny. Eventually, having tried to speak to God, and he went to the north and to the south, the east and the west, and didn't find him anywhere. Then God comes to him. And in a sense, this is the same sort of story that Jesus speaks about as he speaks to the disciples. in Old Testament sort of picture, Old Testament language. God says, Job, can I ask you some questions? In fact, it was a bit like sort of going to court, really. There were a lot of questions, several chapters long, to be honest. There's a couple that I picked out. And there's a bit of humour here. But God says, Job, where were you when I laid earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. And elsewhere he speaks to Job as if, were you there? You know, when I created the crocodile, when I gave this animal stripes and this one spots, were you there? And I didn't spot you. I'm so sorry. You know, you must have been there on the day of creation. Of course, you must have been there. Then he goes on, even more, almost sarcastic, I guess, in a sense. But have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? Have you ever called up the sun from the east and said, come, a new day? You haven't, Job, because you are not God. You can't, Job, because you are not God. And you never will, try though you will. Because not only do you need God, you actually want God. Because God is the one who can come into your life and direct you. Job can say, albeit before all this, Job can say, I don't know where I'm going. I'm lost. But he knows the way I take. Sometimes you come to a road and there's no sign. You're following diligently and sat-nav's useless. It's just quiet. You come to this junction, sat-nav doesn't say a thing. There's no sign up. Is it left or right or what? Am I even on the right road? And you don't know. And sometimes life will be like that for you and me. When life is challenging, when life is painful, when life, not because necessarily of you, but things other people do to you, things that happen to you, happen to your family. Things that you struggle with year after year, and there seems no answer. When will you release me from this problem, we say to the Lord? He says, I am the way. I am the truth. Jesus, as he spoke to the disciples, could tell them, and this really is the point of the whole thing. When he says, I am the way, and I have to say that I do suffer a bit from what Richard suffers from. I can't resist looking at the New Testament without getting my little Greek New Testament out. What does the word in Greek, way, really sort of mean? And actually, I think it's the Message which translates it most accurately, oddly enough. Because it isn't so much, I am the way, I am the road. I am the road. Doesn't sound quite so good, does it? I am the road, the truth and the life. But that's what it literally means. It isn't that Jesus stands and says, go that way, come this way to follow me. He is the way. He is the road that you put your feet on to walk. He is the path. Sometimes it would seem hard and rough and windy, sometimes going through pleasant countryside, sometimes going through desolation and hardship. He is still that road you walk on, and he will not fail you. He will not desert you. So the question this morning for us is, do we see this road as being somewhere that you have to walk to, obey lots of rules and regulations? Or is it rather the road to rescue? It's like the lifeboat that sits in the harbour. As it goes out, it's going out to rescue someone who's in trouble, drowning perhaps, and they go out to rescue. Jesus is the one who wants to rescue you and me. Rescue us really from ourselves, from our sin, from an eternity where we will be ever disappointed, ever sad because we don't have him. Or do we want to go on this road that is him? Do we want to walk on that road that is Jesus? To be given not just some future eternal life, but now, to make you the person you should be, the person you can be. This is what the world wants in so many ways. Be the person you could be. You can be no greater person, no better person than when Jesus comes into your life and you walk with him and on him, if you like. That you just don't listen to his directions, go here. He is the one who takes us. Isn't that good when you don't know the way and someone starts to explain, turn left, turn right, go, no, they say, I'll take you, I'll lead you. And that's what Jesus wants to do to you today. And for those of us who've walked with him for years, decades in fact, sometimes our feet have strayed. Today perhaps is the day, Father's Day, when we can remind ourselves again of the love our Father has for us, that he so loved us that he gave us his Son, Jesus, to be the way, to be the path back to him. I wonder if you know that way. I wonder if you're on that way. Don't let today go and disappear and the sun go down before you have spoken to him and put your feet on him. Amen.